In the 3rd year of my secret relationship with my stepbrother, our family arranged a marriage for him. The match was a perfectly compatible Omega in all aspects, and he gladly accepted. That night, he knocked on my door and said in a low voice, "As long as you don't make a fuss, our relationship stays exactly the same." I nodded submissively, just as I always did. What I didn't tell him was that a marriage had been arranged for me as well, to the heir of the Morgan family, a man whose legs were paralyzed and who was said to be infertile. "Ivan, stop making a fuss." Ethan lowered his eyelashes, his tall frame cutting the light into an angle of inescapable domination. "You know very well that I have to get married sooner or later, but that person?" He slowly lifted his eyelids, his gaze like a heavy, cold blade pinning Ivan's pale face, adding, "Will never be you. As long as you don't make a fuss, our relationship will never change." For the past 3 years, the phrase Ivan had heard the most was "don't make a fuss." Wanting to hold hands in the sunlight? Don't make a fuss. Asking to be picked up from work in the rainy night? Don't make a fuss. Wanting to make their relationship public? Don't make a fuss. Now, even when he was about to grandly announce his engagement to another Omega, all Ivan received was the same entitled "don't make a fuss." Ivan tilted his head up slightly, tugging at the stiff corners of his mouth to form a cold, deeply mocking smile. Ethan furrowed his brows slightly. "What are you smiling at?" "Nothing." Ivan shook his head and submissively lowered his eyelashes, hiding the faint flush of crimson at the corners of his eyes, whispering, "It'll be good. I absolutely won't make a fuss." What Ethan called a relationship was a clandestine affair that had dragged on for 3 years. In the eyes of outsiders, Ivan was always just the obedient, docile younger brother. Hearing this guarantee, Ethan's stern jawline finally relaxed. He gave a soft chuckle, his warm palm habitually rubbing the top of Ivan's head. "I knew you were the best, Ivan." Unfortunately, obedience was the most useless bargaining chip. The harsh vibration of a phone shattered the feigned tranquility. The cold blue light of the screen illuminated the name Jeffrey, the Omega Ethan was about to marry. Ethan casually dropped to go to sleep early before impatiently picking up the phone, pushing the door open, and vanishing into the shadows of the hallway. The moment the door lock clicked into place, Ivan turned around and dragged his suitcase out from the bottom of the closet. This afternoon, Ethan wasn't the only one who had a marriage arranged for him. Ivan did too. The match was the heir of the Morgan family, a man paralyzed in both legs and rumored to lack the ability to reproduce. But none of that mattered. As long as he could completely sever this unseeable relationship, anywhere was fine. The morning light spilled across the dining table through the sheer curtains, outlining a trace of false warmth. It wasn't until the next morning that Ethan pushed the door open, carrying the chill of the night dew. "Not going to eat more? You're too skinny, Ivan?" Ethan approached, his gaze sweeping over the barely touched breakfast on the table. The very second he drew near, a heavy and intensely aggressive, sweet fragrance wrapped around Ivan's airway like an inescapable, invisible vine. It was a completely foreign Omega pheromone, carrying a searing, viscous sweetness that ruthlessly drilled into his lungs. Ivan's eyes snapped up, his gaze locking onto Ethan's slightly open collar. There, a glaring, dark, crimson hickey was brazenly exposed to the air, like a silent yet resounding slap to the face. Ivan tightly gripped the hem of his shirt, his knuckles turning white, and quietly took a half step back, doing everything he could to pull away from the suffocating enclosure of that scent. "I'm full. I'm going upstairs to sleep. Don't wake me for lunch." When the downstairs fell into dead silence, Ivan picked up his suitcase and walked out into the cool breeze of early autumn without looking back. Outside the iron gates of the Morgan estate, the sunlight felt exceptionally soft and healing. Under the butler's guidance, the tedious move-in process was put on fast-forward. At the end of the long corridor, Ivan met his future husband, Christian, for the very first time. The warm afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, plating the silhouette of the man in the wheelchair with a dazzling golden edge. He possessed a face of striking visual impact, but beneath his deep brow bone, his eyes were like cold stones soaked in ice water. Sensing the gaze, Christian displeasedly furrowed his brow, exuding a chilling aura that warned strangers to stay away. Ivan blinked, taking the initiative to step forward and break the silence. "Hello, Mr. Christian. My name is Ivan. I am your Omega." As soon as the words fell, the air slightly stagnated. The curve of Ivan's lips stiffened for a second before he immediately corrected himself. I am your future Omega. Christian lightly swept his emotionless eyes over Ivan's face, not saying a single word. Inside the study, a black gold bank card was pushed toward Ivan's hand. There are 10 million on the card. Use it however you like. Christian's voice was colder than well water in late autumn. However, even if we marry, I will never mark you, nor is it possible for me to fall in love with you. If you have any thoughts of climbing into my bed, I suggest you give them up right now. Ruthless, unfeeling, and disgusted by Omegas. The rumors were indeed true. Yet to Ivan, this highly guarded warning felt like a reassuring antidote. His eyes curved, a genuinely relaxed smile rippling at the bottom of his gaze. Understood, Mr. Christian. I know. As night fell, Ivan lay on the unfamiliar, soft, king-sized bed. The warm orange sleep lamp by the bedside dyed the room in tranquility. The phone vibrated violently in his palm, the screen flashing with Ethan's name. The moment the call connected, the man's domineering voice crashed down on him. Why aren't you home? When are you coming back? I'm waiting for you to eat. Ivan quietly stared at the dim, yellow halo of light on the ceiling. His originally tense neck and shoulders slowly relaxed in the healing warm glow. He gripped the phone tightly and spoke softly. I'm not coming back. What do you mean? Ethan, I'm not going back. A dead silence stretched over the line for a few seconds before Ethan's irritated, dismissive scoff came through. Are you mad? Because of the marriage? Ivan, come back immediately. Don't make me repeat myself. It was that familiar, arrogant tone, forever trampling him underfoot. Ivan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, there was only resolute clarity left in his gaze. Ethan, let's break up. What did you say? The voice on the other end sharply spiked, laced with offended fury. Ivan, what kind of tantrum are you throwing? Ethan, I don't want to live this kind of life anymore. You're getting married, yet you expect me to continue being your secret lover. Is that appropriate? Ivan's voice was so steady, there wasn't even a ripple in it. So, let's just break up. Without giving the other side any room to breathe or retort, Ivan pressed down hard with his fingertip, decisively ending the call. The dial tone echoed through the quiet bedroom, remarkably comforting. After that unhappy parting with Ethan, not a single message had come from him. Ethan always believed that if he just gave him the cold shoulder for a few days, Ivan, the little ant held captive in his palm, would naturally bow his head and beg for mercy once he couldn't take it anymore. Unfortunately, a whole week passed. Ivan sat on the sun-drenched terrace of Christian's home, feeling the temperature of the breeze brushing his cheeks, and contentedly narrowed his eyes. For several days in a row, Christian's seat was always empty. Occasionally brushing past each other in the sunlit corridors, Ivan would offer a gentle greeting, only to be met with the man's cold, indifferent profile. The young master has always been like this. Please don't take it to heart. The housekeeper brought over a bowl of softly stewed sweet soup, the swirling steam looking especially healing under the warm yellow lights. Ivan's eyes curved in a tranquil smile as his fingertips gently rubbed the edge of the warm porcelain bowl. Don't worry, I don't mind. This was nothing more than an insignificant clash, a stone thrown without an echo that couldn't stir a single ripple in his eyes. It wasn't until dusk that day, as the crystal chandelier in the dining room cast a soft glow. Ivan deliberately slowed his chewing until the man across from him set down his utensils. The silver knife and fork in Ivan's hands also lightly tapped against the porcelain plate, letting out a crisp, faint clink. Come home with me tomorrow. Christian pulled a napkin, his movements exuding an unapproachable detachment, his deep voice dropping weightlessly into the quiet air. Ivan's fingertips paused slightly. A flash of surprise passed through his eyes before he submissively lowered his eyelashes. Okay. The next day, the sunlight filtered through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the Morgan mansion, but it couldn't melt the stiff, dead atmosphere in the room. This was nothing more than a routine meeting. In less than 5 minutes, Christian maneuvered his wheelchair to turn around, entirely shutting out old Morgan's thunderous roars behind him. Even his tightly set jawline hadn't changed a fraction. Christian's birth mother had passed away when he was 10, and within half a month, His father had brought a stepmother through the doors. Rumor in their circles always said Christian had a terrible relationship with his father, and seeing it now, it was undeniably true. Inside the car, the confined space made the sound of breathing clear. Christian suddenly turned his face. When you have time, go see your parents too. Looking at the warm-toned streetscape speeding by outside the window, Ivan's chest suddenly tightened. Ever since he moved out of that house, they hadn't contacted him once. Light and shadow flickered across Ivan's fair profile, abruptly dragging his thoughts into that suffocating past. At the age of 10, he stepped into Ethan's home as a burden. Greeting him was Ethan's cold, hostile gaze and the dead rats deliberately thrown by his pillow in the middle of the night. But his mother told Ivan to swallow it all and demanded he curry favor with Ethan. Yet Ethan never stopped targeting him just because of his subservience. That is, until that horrific car crash, when Ivan didn't hesitate to shield Ethan with his own body. The flying shattered glass stabbed fiercely into his back, and the warm, sticky crimson brought a tearing agony. Through his blurry vision, he remembered Ethan's red-rimmed eyes. After that came the secret 3-year underground relationship. There is no rush. We'll talk about it when the time is right, Ethan had promised in the gentlest of voices, rubbing the top of his head. However, that fake tenderness eventually overlapped with the contemptuous phrase "just playing around," utterly shattering amidst the grand announcement of the arranged marriage. Ivan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and expressionlessly ground those shards of glass, laced with cloying memories, into dust at the bottom of his heart. When he opened his eyes again, there was only clarity left. Okay. For the next few days, Christian unprecedentedly stayed at the estate. The thick carpet in the second-floor hallway absorbed all footsteps, and the heating baked the air into a slight haze. The butler blocked Ivan's path, his cloudy eyes carrying a highly oppressive warning. "Mr. Ivan, the young master's rut is approaching, and hell be home all week. Don't entertain any ideas you shouldn't have." The last Omega who didn't know their place tried to seduce him with pheromones, and they're now serving someone else. Before he could finish, a terrifying trace of a top-tier alpha pheromone suddenly leaked from the ajar door on the second floor. It was like biting cedar on a freezing glacier, completely devoid of warmth, laced with the sharpness of a blade, sweeping down with overwhelming intensity. The scent was heavy, violent, bearing an unquestionable exclusivity and destructiveness that instantly drained the warm air from the hallway. Under the crushing weight of this suffocating frost, Ivan dug his nails into his palms, using the sting to compel himself to stay awake. He lifted his pale yet harmless face, a submissive smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Don't worry. I absolutely won't." In the second-floor corridor, the warm orange wall sconces burned quietly, casting soft halos on the carpet. A muffled, massive crash suddenly tore through the tranquility of the night, making even the walls tremble faintly. Ivan hadn't wanted to get involved in this mess, but the butler was nowhere to be seen. In this expansive, empty estate, the sound carried an unsettling deadness and fragility. He got out of bed, fumbled in the drawer for a few scent blocker patches, and pressed them flawlessly over the gland at the back of his neck, trying to give himself a flimsy layer of security. Pushing open the half-closed door, the overwhelming top-tier alpha pheromones surged into his nasal cavity like a collapsing glacier, causing Ivan's glands to spasm violently and his breathing to stutter. The dim moonlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, outlining the tall figure collapsed beside the wheelchair. Christian's eyes were crimson, and cold sweat dripped from his temple down his tight jawline, like a desperate beast trapped in a broken shell. "I told you to get out. Didn't you hear me?" The man's voice was intensely hoarse, thick with defensiveness. Bearing the suffocating domination, Ivan's fingertips trembled slightly from physiological fear. He didn't retreat. Instead, he slowed his breathing and stepped forward to support Christian's sweat-drenched arm. The man was incredibly heavy. Ivan gritted his teeth, hoisting him back into the wheelchair bit by bit. His gaze accidentally swept over those lifeless legs, and Ivan's eyelashes fluttered slightly. 3 years ago, Christian collided with a speeding car on an overpass. Because the rescue was delayed too long, he could never stand again. That news report could still be found online today. You think him pitiful, don't you? Christian's pride was instantly stung. He violently grabbed the phone nearby and smashed it against the wall, the flying shards cutting through the air. Get out! The concentrated pheromones materialized into actual chains, suffocating Ivan until he was dizzy. Forcing himself through the discomfort, he reached out for the suppressants on the table, but in the next second, an inescapable magnetism seized him by the neck. The world spun as Ivan was fiercely yanked against that burning hot chest. Christian's large hand locked onto the back of his neck like a branding iron, roughly tearing away the thin blocker patch. Sharp canines pierced the fragile gland without an ounce of mercy. The freezing, frenzied cedar pheromones, carrying an irresistible magnetism and aggression, flooded frantically into Ivan's system like a bursting dam. The scent was drawn into his body, only to ignite a spreading wildfire within. The back of Ivan's neck was shockingly hot, and every bone in his body felt drained of strength as the primal instinct of an Omega's heat was drawn out. Christian, let go of me. Physiological tears of crimson were squeezed from the corners of his eyes. His violently trembling fingers blindly grabbed a scattered suppressant needle from the floor and plunged it hard into the back of Christian's hand. The moment the iron grip loosened, Ivan stumbled and fled back into the warm light next door, leaning heavily against the door, panting heavily as his chest heaved violently. The next morning, the healing dawn light filtered through the dining room's sheer curtains, casting a gentle and warm glow over the solid wood table. The back of Ivan's neck was swollen high, still throbbing with a dull ache even under the thickest blocker patch. He kept his eyelashes lowered, silently eating his breakfast. Across the table, Christian had already returned to his usual cold demeanor, but that incredibly present gaze was settling heavily on Ivan. Ivan. The man's voice broke the morning tranquility. I bit you last night. Meeting Ivan's blank stare, Christian scoffed lightly, a flash of self-deprecation and chill crossing his eyes. Your pheromones work on me. He paused, his tone laced with condescending ice. From now on during my rut, you will soothe me. I will pay you. But don't delude yourself into thinking I'll fully mark you, and certainly don't think I'll ever fall in love with you. The morning breeze brushed by, carrying a barely discernible trace of warmth. Ivan tightened his grip on the silver fork, then gently smoothed out his brow, curving his lips into a shallow, unbothered arc. After all, he was just a human-shaped suppressant bought for 10 million. It was just lending some pheromones. He could accept that. The dim blue light of the phone screen illuminated Ivan's calm face. In the family group chat, Ethan was high-profile announcing his engagement date set for 3 days later. Ivan tapped his fingertips, nonchalantly typing out the word congratulations. This cold blessing instantly detonated Ethan's fury. The screen flashed incessantly, filling up with interrogations and pressure. Is running away from home fun? Marriage isn't something I can decide. What do you want me to do? What will your mother think? Looking at those words of impotent rage, Ivan didn't even bat an eyelash. He directly held down the power button. As for the dozens of impatient missed calls early the next morning, Ivan didn't even look before decisively dragging the number into his blacklist. The following morning, the healing morning light spilled over the second-floor hallway like shattered gold, baking the hardwood floors warm. Ivan skillfully pushed open Christian's door. The frenzied scent of frosty cedar instantly rushed at him. Because of childhood trauma, this alpha aura lingered perpetually on the edge of violence, carrying bone-piercing chills and fine shards of ice that ruthlessly scraped against Ivan's airway. Yet, when Christian pinned him against the wheelchair and those two sharp canines ruthlessly pierced the soft gland at the back of his neck, that tyrannical cold fragrance seemed to find its only solace. In the moment their pheromones deeply intertwined, an uncontrollable tingling shudder rippled down Ivan's spine. The slightly warm morning halo fell on their overlapping silhouettes, and Ivan's submission miraculously smoothed over the restlessness in the man's bones. 3 days later, at the engagement banquet, the dazzling crystal chandelier cast an opulent yet warm glow. Ivan pushed the wheelchair-bound Christian slowly into the venue, instantly becoming the focal point of the swirling undercurrents. Jeffrey, dressed in a pure white haute couture suit, walked over with a champagne glass. His probing gaze landed on Ivan, the smile on his lips flawless. Ethan's younger brother, right? Seeing Ivan nod, Jeffrey's smile widened. Ethan's brother. I've heard him mention you. I thought you weren't coming to our engagement party. Ivan's eyes curved, the warm light reflecting in his clear gaze without a trace of gloom. My brother is getting engaged. Of course, his younger brother has to come. Wishing you both a happy marriage. Not far away, Ethan was staring fixedly at the two of them. His jawline was so tight it was almost fracturing, and the knuckles gripping his wine glass had turned a pale, sickly white. Sensing the freezing low pressure radiating from Christian beside him, Ivan handed the gift to Jeffrey, turned the wheelchair, and left without a shred of reluctance. Avoiding the noisy crowd, they walked into a quiet, sunlit corridor. Ivan stopped, leaned in close, and asked gently, "Mr. Christian, are you feeling unwell?" Being in his rut yet pushing himself to attend, the man's cedar scent was saturated with heavy suppression. Christian lifted his deep eyes, his gaze sweeping over Ivan's slightly parted lips, his voice husky. "No," Ivan breathed a sigh of relief. "Then wait here. I'll go use the restroom?" Just as he stepped out of the washroom, Ivan's wrist was suddenly seized by an immense strength. Before Ivan could even make a sound, he was roughly dragged into a dim, empty private room. The door locked with a heavy thud. Ethan's eyes were crimson. His eucalyptus pheromones, thick with intense anger and agitation, exploded into the narrow space like a bursting flood. The scent was abrasive and highly aggressive, strangling the surrounding air like invisible vines. Drawing it into the lungs felt like carrying a searing dark fire, pressing down so hard on Ivan's chest that even breathing became incredibly heavy. "Ivan, why did you block me?" Ethan pinned Ivan hard against the door panel, his chest heaving violently, practically pressing the question out through gritted teeth. Compelled to tilt his head up, Ivan looked at the out-of-control man before him. His brow furrowed slightly, and his cool voice held nothing but a temperatureless calm. "Because you're annoying." "Annoying to you?" Ethan looked as if he had heard something utterly absurd. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress the panic in his eyes, and spoke in that familiar, patronizing tone. "Ivan, are you still mad at me? A major thing like a marriage alliance isn't something you or I can decide. Do you understand?" "Ethan, I'm not mad." Ivan looked directly into his eyes, his tone nonchalant, yet it cut like a sharp, soft blade. This extreme calmness completely pierced Ethan's disguised composure. He pointed toward the door, his fingertips trembling slightly from intense jealousy, suppressing his surging rage as he growled. "Not mad? Then what exactly is your relationship with that cripple outside?" Under the dim, soft wall lamp, Ethan's eyes burned with a fury that could almost ignite the air. The heavy eucalyptus pheromones grew wildly in the warm light like furious thorns, pressing aggressively. "Do you even know who he is?" "The heir to the Morgan family, and he has a fiancée." "Ivan, doing this, are you trying to be the homewrecker ruining someone else's family?" Ivan powerfully pushed away the oppressive body leaning over him. Meeting Ethan's red-rimmed eyes, his gaze was as clear as water. "What about you then? Making me continue as your secret lover in the dark. Isn't that making me a homewrecker too?" Ethan's tight jawline suddenly stiffened, and a crack of panic instantly split the arrogance in his eucalyptus scent. His face turned deadly pale, inch by inch. "It's different." "There is no difference. And besides," Ivan looked at him, his cool voice carrying immense weight in the heated air. "He isn't just someone else. He is my alpha." Ethan acted as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. His pupils contracted violently before he pulled a highly unnatural sneer. "Ivan, if you're going to make up a lie, make it a believable one. How could Christian possibly be your alpha? Stop making a fuss, okay?" Before Ivan could shake off the tight grip on his wrist, an abrupt ringtone interrupted the tug-of-war. Ethan picked up Jeffrey's call, his tone instantly switching to gentle comfort. After hanging up, he looked down at Ivan from his high horse. "I'll come find you and make it up to you once the engagement banquet is over. Ivan, be good." As the crisp sound of leather shoes faded away, the oppressive eucalyptus scent finally dissipated. Back in the corner of the grand hall, the dazzling champagne tower reflected healing, fractured light. Christian, in his wheelchair, raised his deep eyes, a very faint trace of mockery flashing at the bottom of his gaze. "I thought you were going to crash the wedding." Ivan remained noncommittal. In this lavish banquet, saturated with interests and pleasantries, no one cared about his existence. The fawning smiles of his stepfather and biological mother, Ethan's crisp suit, and Christian's cold profile intertwined and flashed, ultimately freezing on two cars driving in opposite directions. Christian went to the company, while Ivan returned to that empty estate. At midnight, only a few warm orange nightlights remained lit in the first-floor hall, radiating a peaceful warmth. Ivan had just walked down the stairs when the heavy front doors were thrown open. The assistant, Bruce, his face deathly pale, hurried in while pushing the wheelchair. Under the warm light, the top two buttons of Christian's shirt were roughly torn open. Veins bulged on his forearms resting on the armrests, and even his breathing carried an abnormal heaviness. "Mr. Ivan," Bruce sounded as if he had grasped a lifeline, his voice trembling. "Mr. Christian is extremely unwell, but he won't let anyone touch him. Please, I beg you to go up and take care of him." Without a moment's hesitation, Ivan hurried to the second floor. He pushed open the bedroom door. The main lights were off, leaving only the soft moonlight filtering in through the window and the dim floor lamp by the bedside. Christian was sunken into the dark bedding, his large frame restlessly tense. Just as Ivan reached out his hand, it was clamped tight mid-air by a scorching hot palm. The man's hand felt like a branding iron, startlingly hot. "Get out." Christian opened his eyes, his hoarse voice saturated with extreme endurance and danger. Yet the grip around Ivan's wrist showed absolutely no intention of letting go. In the air, the originally freezing cedar pheromones were now like a completely out-of-control volcano, mingling with domination, despair, and boiling temperatures as they recklessly crashed against the surrounding walls. Braving this pressure that felt like it would crush him, Ivan reached back and peeled off the blocker patch from his neck. In a flash, a rich, soft, healing rose pheromone bloomed quietly in the night like flower petals, tenderly and intimately wrapping around the frenzied cedar. Ivan naturally bent over, offering his fragile nape to the man's lips, whispering warmly, "Mr. Christian, please bite me." The man's heavy pants struck deeply against Ivan's ear, carrying searing heat. In the next second, a large hand powerfully pressed the back of his neck down. Sharp canines pierced deeply into the tender gland with an unprecedented, fierce power. Ivan let out a muffled groan, the corners of his eyes instantly coaxing out a touch of crimson. But this was absolutely no ordinary soothing. Christian did not let go. His rough tongue, carrying the scalding heat of lust, wetly licked across the seeping bite mark, and immediately after bit down again, even deeper and harder. Boom. The wildly raging cedar pheromones poured frantically into Ivan's system like a reversing tide of boiling seawater. The scent was no longer cold. Instead, it carried a world-destroying scorching heat that instantly ignited the primal dark fire within the Omega's body. "Christian," Ivan's voice was tinged with terrified sobs, his spine trembling violently. A foreign heat wave burned all the way from his gland down to every limb and bone. The heat that was drawn out made his limbs go as soft as a puddle of spring water. He struggled desperately, trying to escape that scalding body, but the man's iron grip arms pinned him immovably in place. Rip! The fragile fabric was roughly torn apart, making a harsh sound. Relying on his astonishing arm strength, Christian wrapped his arm around Ivan's supple waist and pulled him down fiercely onto the soft bed. The dim floor lamp outlined the surging, utterly uncontrolled heavy lust in the man's eyes. The wildness and instinct belonging to a top-tier alpha thoroughly tore away the disguise of disability. "Mr. Christian, it's Ivan." Ivan's eye sockets were soaked, his trembling fingertips pressing against the man's solid chest in an attempt to call back his last shred of reason. But the only response he received was the alpha's utterly frenzied claim. The out-of-control cedar relentlessly strangled the weeping rose, and the all-or-nothing invasion instantly tore down all defenses. The ultimate pain and scalding pheromones intertwined together, sliding down Ivan's physiological tears to shatter into this dim, soft, yet merciless warm light. The pale glimmer of dawn drearily tore through the night. Ivan gripped the cold stair railing, his legs shaking uncontrollably. The thoroughly bitten-through gland at the back of his neck throbbed incessantly, as if the almost brutal frosty cedar scent still lingered there. The butler at the top of the stairs looked at him with eyes full of shock. Ivan lowered his face, which was as pale as paper, tightly gripping his torn clothes, his voice as hoarse as if he had swallowed gravel. "Don't tell him. Go help him clean up." The pungent smell of disinfectant soon covered the residual pheromones. When he opened his eyes again, it was the healing, soft white light of the hospital. It turned out the butler had found Ivan burning up with fever and unconscious, and quickly had him sent to the hospital. Ivan lifted a weak finger to touch the heavy gauze over the gland on the back of his neck. The brand of a lifelong mark made his very bones shudder with the presence of another man. His phone screen flashed silently, entirely filled with interrogations from Ethan using a different number. Ivan's eyes were completely emotionless as his fingertips swiped coldly, sweeping that number into the blacklist once again. 2 days later, the afternoon sun baked the Morgan estate into a lazy, gentle warmth. With nowhere to avoid it, Ivan bumped head-on into Christian in the hallway, who was preparing to go out. The memory of that night's extremely out-of-control claim instantly flooded back. Ivan instinctively shrank back, his fingertips tightly twisting the hem of his shirt. "You're afraid of me?" Christian sat in his wheelchair, his deep brow casting a shadow. It wasn't a question, but a certainty. "I'm not, Mr. Christian." Ivan kept his head down. "Is that right?" Christian's long fingers tapped the leather sofa beside him, his tone undeniable. "Come sit over here." Ivan moved over stiffly. As soon as he got close, that familiar piercing cedar scent, which now strangely carried a trace of laziness, wrapped around him like a massive, invisible net, refusing to be rejected. Deep within his thoroughly marked body, a shameful sense of reassurance and submission unexpectedly rose toward this scent. The warm sun on the terrace made one's bones go soft, but his mother's phone call poured over his head like a basin of ice water. "Ivan, Ethan is engaged now, so you shouldn't contact him anymore, okay?" The knuckles of Ivan's hand holding the phone instantly turned white, the air in his chest feeling as if it had been drained. So that 3-year underground relationship he thought was secret had been seen by his mother all along. Yet, she only stepped up to snuff him out as a hidden risk when Ethan's position was finally secure. "Okay, don't worry, I won't bother him." Ivan tugged at the corners of his mouth, watching the tree shadows swaying in the wind outside the window, but the bottom of his eyes was a pool of temperatureless, dead silence. A few days later, in front of the iron gates outside the estate, Ethan was shut outside. His agitated eucalyptus pheromones carried extreme aggression, acting like a furious net that shredded the surrounding air. "What do you want?" Ivan stood behind the iron gates, his expression calm. Ethan's eyes were covered in crimson veins, his chest heaving violently as his voice suddenly rose. "Why did you block me? What exactly do you want? What does it mean that you want to break up with me?" "No reason. I just want to break up. My marriage is also my own business." Ivan's voice was as calm as stagnant water. This extreme coldness thoroughly tore apart Ethan's facade of deep affection. His face turned iron blue as he pulled out a lighter and lit a cigarette. The strong smell of tobacco instantly mixed into the eucalyptus scent, carrying a searing temperature and abrasive agitation that rushed to Ivan's face, stabbing at him aggressively. Ethan stared fixatedly at Ivan, slowly blowing out a cloudy smoke ring, a sneering, mocking smile hooking the corner of his mouth. "Fine, you want to break up. Let's see how long you can last. Ivan, don't come begging me when the time comes. I absolutely won't be soft-hearted." With no one to disturb him, Ivan actually lived quite comfortably. Except that Christian's occasional behavior left Ivan utterly puzzled. For example, the bank deposit message flashing on his phone screen, 20 million. In the study, the warm reading light cast onto Christian's sharply contoured profile. Hearing Ivan's inquiry, he lifted his eyelids from the desk full of documents, his gaze sweeping over coldly. "Is it too little?" "No, it's too much." Christian lowered his eyelashes again, the sound of flipping paper exceptionally clear in the quiet space. "You soothed me and helped a lot. I will keep giving it to you in the future. But besides money, there is nothing else." He paused, the fountain pen in his hand, stopping on the paper. That highly oppressive cedar scent suddenly fell silent, morphing into highly territorial, invisible chains that wove into Ivan's breathing. "Cut things off with that person you have on the outside." Ivan froze for a second, then met the man's unfathomable eyes, his soft features curving into an obedient arc. "I don't have any relationship with him at all, Mr. Christian. That's for the best." The warm, late autumn sun filtered through the floor to ceiling windows, dragging lazy shadows across the wooden floor. To Ivan, these 3 months of time felt like a suspended dream. Ethan hadn't made a sound for a whole month, and that mother in name only, besides frequently contacting Christian to beg for projects, had never spared him even a single perfunctory greeting. In the first-floor dining room, the white steam from the stewed soup enveloped a healing temperature. The housekeeper approached with clear kanji. Looking at Ivan's pale cheeks, her eyes filled with heartache. "Your face has thinned out so much. Please eat a little." Ivan wearily curved his eyes. Just as he was about to nod, his stomach suddenly churned violently. He covered his mouth tightly, his fingertips turning an abnormal, sickly white. These past few days, he had been tortured almost to the point of losing his shape by lethargy and unprovoked vomiting. These symptoms, why does it look so much like pregnancy? The housekeeper, holding the tray, murmured softly as she turned around. That lightweight sentence hit like a drop of ice water into a boiling wok, making Ivan shudder all over. He lowered his eyelashes, an absurd feeling rising from the bottom of his heart. Impossible. Everyone on the outside knew that after that car accident, Christian hadn't just been paralyzed in both legs, he had completely lost his fertility. That afternoon, at a private hospital in the city center, the incandescent lights in the corridor cast a cold, rational glow. Ivan looked as if he had been hit with a freezing spell, staring dead on at the thin medical report in his hands. The off-the-charts hormone indices announced a crazy truth in black and white. He was pregnant. Even. A voice laced with unwillingness and agitation abruptly tore through the dead silence. Before Ivan even had time to turn around, the report in his hands was fiercely snatched away by sheer strength. The intense, furious eucalyptus pheromones swept up like a sudden gale, carrying a burning temperature as they tyrannically monopolized the air in the corridor. Ethan's eyes were red. He stared fixedly at the words on the paper, veins bulging on his neck. "You're pregnant? Whose is it? Christian's?" That overwhelming presence, full of extreme possessiveness, was suffocating. Breathing it into his lungs felt like swallowing dry, hot gravel, triggering another bout of churning in Ivan's stomach. He knitted his brow tight, forcibly enduring the physical nausea as he quietly took a step back, escaping that sickening enclosure of scent. "What does it have to do with you?" This extreme calmness utterly enraged Ethan. He suddenly closed in, his voice through gritted teeth laced with a jealous madness. "I was with you for 3 years and never even touched you. How much time has passed, and you're actually pregnant? Who doesn't know that Christian is a sterile cripple? Ivan, are you out of your mind, daring to carry a bastard?" "Ethan, what you're saying is truly laughable." Ivan coldly lifted his eyelids, his voice lacking a single ripple. "He is my alpha. Is it not perfectly normal for me to be pregnant with his child?" Right in this tension-filled moment, the surrounding air temperature dropped unprovoked to the freezing point. A freezing cedar scent, armed with immense exclusivity and a murderous aura, descended like a collapsing 10,000-foot glacier. With an absolute crushing stance, it instantly froze and obliterated that agitated eucalyptus scent into ash. The terrifying dominance of a top-tier alpha smashed down like a boulder, forcing Ethan's face to pale and his breathing to instantly halt. The unhurried sound of rolling wheelchair wheels drew near. Christian stopped 2 steps away. His deep features under the cold light looked like a statue devoid of emotion. In his hand, he held a lit phone. On the screen was the electronic pregnancy report that had just been synced and sent by the hospital system. Ivan's heart suddenly dropped, and even his breathing stopped. The warning of "I will never mark you" from his first day entering the Morgan family was still vivid in his mind. Now, not only was he marked for life, but he was also carrying this impossible-to-exist child. He nervously clenched his fingertips. Meeting the man's highly penetrating gaze, his voice was dry. "Mr. Christian, please listen to my explanation." "Someone else's?" Christian slowly raised his eyes, his gaze moving from the phone screen to Ivan's pale face. That deep voice was like a freezing wind howling from an abyss, devoid of any warmth. He didn't even spare Ethan a glance, merely speaking faintly to the empty air beside him. "Mr. Ethan, if there is nothing else, we have family matters to attend to." Not far away, Jeffrey's voice calling for Ethan happened to ring out. Ethan gritted his teeth hard. With eyes full of complexity and unwillingness, he gave Ivan one last glare before ultimately failing to withstand that shudder-inducing cedar dominance, leaving in a wretched state. The heating inside the car baked a suffocating dead silence. After pouring out the entire truth of that night's utterly out-of-control entanglement, Ivan tightly gripped the hem of his shirt. Beside him, Christian leaned back in the seat with his eyes closed. His deep features were hidden in the flickering light and shadows from the car window, like a dormant reef. Just as Ivan's breathing hitched and he hesitated uneasily, the man suddenly opened his eyes. That highly penetrating gaze cut through the dimness like a sharp blade, pinning straight onto him. "You got a fever because I marked you?" It wasn't just because of the mark. That night, the frenzied cedar pheromones acted like a completely unrestrained beast, repeatedly crushing and swallowing that faint trace of rose fragrance in their ultimate fusion. No matter how Ivan, with red-rimmed eyes, trembled and begged for mercy, that destructive cold fragrance refused to let him off. Ivan bit his pale lower lip, his fingertips trembling slightly. Enduring that highly oppressive gaze, he gave a small nod. The air fell into a heart-palpitating silence once more. As soon as the Maybach parked at the Morgan estate, Ivan made his decision. He ruthlessly severed all hesitation and stuffed his only few pieces of clothing into a suitcase. Holding on to the enormous $30 million compensation, he didn't wait for the verdict of banishment that was bound to descend. Under the cover of night, Ivan dragged his suitcase, thoroughly blending himself and the impossible-to-exist accident in his belly into the cool winds of early winter. However, just a few days later, the tranquility was utterly torn apart. When the door to the cramped rented room was violently pushed open, Christian's face was as black as the dark clouds right before a torrential storm. The butler tactfully pushed the wheelchair into the room, then immediately turned around and locked the door with a loud thud without a second's hesitation. The overwhelming freezing cedar carried an extremely frenzied gloom, instantly sucking the oxygen out of the room. The scent was no longer the cold rejection of the past. Instead, it bore a stormy, tidal possessiveness, like countless invisible chains that tightly strangled Ivan's breathing, causing the gland on the back of his neck to twitch uncontrollably with a tingling soreness. "Mr. Christian," Ivan shot up from the wooden chair in shock, his legs giving way uncontrollably under the crushing weight of the top-tier alpha. "So you still recognize me?" The man's voice sounded as if it were wrapped in crushed ice, a terrifying storm brewing at the bottom of his pitch-black eyes. "Do you know how long I looked for you? Running away with my child. Ivan, you have a lot of nerve." Ivan's Adam's apple bobbed with difficulty, all his words blocked in his parched throat. Enduring that suffocating pressure, he mumbled for a long while before squeezing out a pale retort. "Mr. Christian, didn't you not want this child?" The furious cedar scent abruptly halted. Christian's jawline tightened fiercely. After a moment of silence, he slowly lifted his deep eyes and demanded, word by word, "Did I say that to you with my own mouth?" Well, he hadn't. But Christian's attitude at the time had made it obvious he didn't want the child. Right in the midst of this taut standoff, the door lock clicked open unexpectedly. "Ivan, I brought you some things to nourish your body since I was passing by. You're pregnant after all." David barged in carrying bags of items, full of sunny warmth. Before he could even finish his sentence, he stopped in his tracks, looking warily and confusingly at the man in the wheelchair with a terrifying aura. Who is he? Not giving Ivan a chance to speak, Christian's expression instantly darkened to the extreme. The cedar pheromones immediately transformed into a highly aggressive blade, charging straight for the door. "I am his alpha, the father of the child in his belly. Who are you?" This sentence, brimming with hostility and a declaration of sovereignty, dropped into Ivan's lukewarm heart like an effervescent tablet. Sour, slightly sweet bubbles instantly bubbled up in his chest. During the 3 years with Ethan, that man was only ever willing to grant him the hidden title of a younger brother. Yet the cold, ruthless man in front of him had just unhesitatingly and resoundingly staked his claim in front of an outsider. David froze for a second. Looking at the scene before him, his brain suddenly filled in the blanks, and he flared up in an instant. "So you're that scumbag who abandoned him?" A blank trace of astonishment flashed through Christian's deep eyes. "What did you say?" Seeing that the furious cedar was about to lose control again, Ivan hurried forward and pushed David, bags and all, right out the door. David, go back for now. Ivan leaned against the doorframe, taking a deep breath to suppress the ripples in his eyes, and comforted him warmly. Thank you for the things. I'll properly thank you after I resolve this. Under David's hostile but helpless gaze, Ivan decisively shut the door. As the lock fell into place, the cramped room once again held only the two of them, that aggressively watchful cedar scent, and the unhideable, violently throbbing rose fragrance in the air. In the narrow rented room, as the door shut tight, only the sound of their breathing remained in the air. Who is he? Christian stared intently at Ivan, his brow furrowing deeply, a sour, violent rage churning at the bottom of his pitch-black eyes. Ivan, are you looking for a new father for my child? Just as Ivan opened his mouth to speak, a sudden dragging pain struck his abdomen. An omega during pregnancy possesses an almost greedy physiological yearning for their alpha's pheromones. When he fled, he had secretly taken one of Christian's shirts, burying his face in it to draw in the scent whenever he felt unwell. But the cold fragrance on it had long dissipated, and now that faint remainder could no longer suppress his body's outcry. Ivan turned pale and collapsed onto the worn sofa. Fine cold sweat beaded on his forehead, his voice weak. Mr. Christian, weren't you going to chase me away? That's why I left on my own. Don't worry, I won't go bother you. Christian's tight jawline suddenly paused, and the storm in his eyes stalled for a second. When did I say I was going to chase you away? Ivan blinked, his long eyelashes fluttering. I broke our agreement. Not only did I let you mark me for life, but I also got pregnant with your child. According to Christian's original warning, this was shameless. Ivan. Christian cut him off with a deep voice. The man maneuvered the wheelchair closer, leaning down with an intense magnetism, his gaze locked tightly onto him. That person just now, who exactly was he? A friend, has already married. Seeing Christian's expression was still frighteningly dark, Ivan had no choice but to brace himself and add, his omega thought my alpha died, so he took extra care of me. You told people I was dead? Christian's voice froze instantly. I didn't. Ivan hastily shook his head, terrified that this massive blame would fall on his head if he was a second too late. Seeing Ivan's pale, pained face, Christian tightened the corners of his lips, lifted his hand, and roughly tore off the blocker patch on the back of his own neck. In an instant, the originally bone-chilling cedar scent became like snow melting under the warm early winter sun. This scent shed all its rage and aggression, transforming into a warm, soft, and heavily weighted invisible blanket that densely and undeniably wrapped Ivan up completely. The moment he breathed it into his lungs, the soothing presence belonging to a top-tier alpha flowed through his system into every limb and bone. His churning stomach was miraculously ironed flat by the warm water, and even Ivan's tense, trembling spine completely softened. The blending of pheromones brought a secretive healing sensation. It wasn't until Ivan's breathing thoroughly steadied that Christian slowly reeled in his scent, his voice low. Ivan, come back with me. The child in your belly needs me. In the end, Ivan still didn't go back. And Christian actually moved into this dilapidated rented room. The butler efficiently brought over his luggage an hour later, then slipped away as smoothly as if oil were rubbed on the soles of his feet. Ivan looked at the man in the wheelchair, his fingertips twisting his shirt hem. I have no way to take care of you. I don't need you to take care of me. Christian lifted his eyes, his gaze serene. You just take care of yourself. As night fell, a trace of dim yellow light leaked through the old door panel. Christian didn't enter the bedroom. Instead, he guarded outside the door all night. Threads of warm cedar scent drifted through the crack in the door, filling the entire room like a gentle tide. Under the alpha's instinctual comfort, Ivan slept his soundest, most secure sleep in 3 months. Meanwhile, Christian outside the door sported terrifying dark circles under his eyes for 3 days straight. Looking at the man's exhausted brow, Ivan sat by the sun-drenched window and spoke softly. Mr. Christian, if you do not wish to continue this marriage alliance, you don't have to push yourself. I won't use the child to blackmail you. Christian's long fingers resting on the wheelchair armrest abruptly tightened, his knuckles turning white. He lifted his head, his bloodshot eyes filled with unbelievable chill. You want to cancel the marriage? I don't agree. Before Ivan could argue, Christian looked straight into his eyes, his tone holding unprecedented solemnity and unfamiliarity. Ivan, I am your alpha, and I will take responsibility for you. I hope you can give me a chance too. But you don't like me. Ivan, give me some time. The sunlight fell onto the man's broad shoulders, softening the unapproachable solid ice around him. Ivan swallowed all his words of refusal and softly said, "Okay." Just 1 week later, the roar of a private jet pierced through the clouds. The young master has never been loved. He doesn't know what love is. Before boarding, the butler handed Ivan a cup of warm milk. Looking at Christian's back in the distance, he lowered his voice and sighed. The day you came back from the hospital and he found you missing, he searched for you like a madman. He even went straight to smash up Mr. Ethan's place. That day, he sat lifelessly in your empty room for a very long time. To him, you are different. Ivan lowered his eyelashes, his thumb subconsciously rubbing the cool platinum band on his ring finger. This was placed there by Christian's own hands an hour before they got their marriage certificate. The man couldn't kneel on one knee, so he could only sit in his wheelchair and take his hand. When their fingertips touched, the alpha's searing body heat traveled through the metal ring, hot enough to make a person's heart turn soft. I will take responsibility for you. Christian's eyes at the time reflected fractured light. If you disdain me, you can still back out now. Ivan hadn't said anything. He merely held the man's warm palm back, pushed that wheelchair, and walked step by step into the warm light of the registry hall. It wasn't until the steel seals stamped down on 2 thin sheets of paper that they became the most legally justifiable wedded husbands. In the stillness of the night, the fever induced by pregnancy crashed down like a sudden tsunami, thoroughly swallowing Ivan's frail body without any warning. Inside the bedroom, the originally harsh, frosty cedar pheromones were now like a heavy blanket warmed by body heat, desperately intertwining with the sweet, scalding, and almost out-of-control rose fragrance on Ivan's body. Christian, I'm hot. The corners of Ivan's eyes glistened with a flushed wetness. His fingertips, dotted with fine, cold sweat, softly climbed onto the man's firm forearm. Bite me a little. Even though Christian couldn't use his legs, he possessed explosively powerful upper body strength. With one arm, he pulled Ivan's supple waist closer, locking him firmly into a burning embrace. The man submissively lowered his head. His sharp canines heavily ground over the gland, exuding that tantalizing sweet scent, injecting his soothing cold fragrance. But it wasn't enough. Ivan panted rapidly, his eyes shimmering with moisture, almost pleading. "Help me." Christian's Adam's apple bobbed violently. His pitch-black eyes churned with suppressed dark fire under the dim bedside lamp. He closed his eyes, his voice startlingly hoarse. Okay. The alpha was imprisoned by a broken shell, but Ivan could manage. After the ultimate taking and sinking, the 2 pheromones completely merged into one. Exhausted, Ivan lay on the man's broad, warm chest, listening to the steady and powerful heartbeat, and fell into a deep, secure sleep. Half a month later, the Maybach slowly pulled up outside the Morgan estate. In the cold winds of late autumn, Ethan looked like a trapped beast that had lost its territory. Haggard and withered, he blocked the car desperately. "Do you want to see him?" Christian turned his face, his cold and handsome features revealing a composure that offered absolute backing. Ivan nodded. Some rotting flesh had to be cut out personally. "I'll wait for you inside the house." Christian didn't ask further, leaving behind his silent support. The car door opened. Ethan approached quickly, his eyes covered in crimson blood vessels. "Ivan, I didn't marry Jeffrey. I called off the wedding." He forcefully grabbed Ivan's wrist, as if clutching his final straw. "Come back with me. I don't care whose child is in your belly, as long as you come back with me." The arrogant, violent eucalyptus scent of the past was gone from the air, leaving only suffocating subservience. Ivan calmly lowered his eyes and resolutely withdrew his wrist from the other's palm, bit by bit. "I will not go back with you. I have already gotten my marriage certificate with Christian." Ethan froze in place, as if he had heard an absurd joke, his eye sockets turning violently red. "Then what about me?" "Ivan, why?" "Because he doesn't hide our relationship from the outside world or make me feel embarrassed. Even though he looks cold, he gives me choices and never compels me. Ivan looked straight at him, his cool voice drawing a sharp, clean halt in the wind. Ethan, you are in the past now. This is enough. Time slid into the 5th month of pregnancy amidst a secure warmth. The cold light of the hospital corridor, however, could not melt the bone-piercing reality. The follow-up results remained the same. Those legs would never stand again for the rest of his life. Back home, the heavy curtains were half drawn. Christian sat in his wheelchair, bitterly stroking the warm back of Ivan's neck, his voice saturated with a dead, dry hoarseness. Ivan, do you want a divorce? I won't ever be able to stand up for the rest of my life. His heart felt as if it were fiercely squeezed by an invisible hand, aching so dully it made his eyes burn. Ivan stubbornly stiffened his neck and lifted his face with determination. No divorce. I will take care of you. The ice at the bottom of Christian's eyes shattered inch by inch. He buried his face deeply into the crook of Ivan's neck, his breathing trembling. I can't bear to let you go. Actually, Ivan knew. Countless late nights, by the half-bright, half-dim moonlight, he had seen the wheelchair on the balcony and the flickering red sparks of a cigarette. That once imperious top-tier alpha was silently chewing on the resentment of being a cripple in the quiet, empty darkness. But Ivan just pretended to be sound asleep, using the quietest companionship to defend his lover's final shred of dignity. The warm orange sleep lamp diffused a healing temperature throughout the bedroom. Ivan curled up comfortably in Christian's arms, inhaling that warm cedar fragrance that made him feel incomparably secure, and asked softly, "Your feelings for me? Is it a responsibility?" The arms holding him tightened slightly. After a long silence, Christian lowered his head and reverently placed a kiss on the soft top of Ivan's head. This matter has troubled me for a long time. I didn't know if it was responsibility or something else. The man's voice was deep and deeply attached, carrying the clarity of clouds parting to reveal the sun. But now, I've found the answer. Ivan, it's love. Ivan's eyes curved, a sly, warm light rippling at the bottom of his clear gaze. But someone once said to not delude myself into thinking he'd ever fall in love with me. A touch of helpless tenderness melted in Christian's deep eyes. I was wrong. Ivan chuckled lightly, tilted his head up, and met that scalding kiss. The two pheromones completely merged in the warm light, turning into an airtight net. Then let them be tied together like this. In the name of love, tied together forever. This is a healing story about breaking free from a toxic love and finding mutual redemption. My heart aches for Ivan, yet I admire him immensely. During his 3-year secret relationship with Ethan, he endured and compromised. But when Ethan tried to keep him as a hidden lover, even after an arranged marriage, Ivan displayed stunning decisiveness. He walked away cleanly, no emotional spiraling, no messy entanglements, knowing exactly when to let go. When Christian first appeared, he was like a block of impenetrable ice. He might have said, "Don't delude yourself into thinking I'll ever fall in love with you," but his actions were incredibly genuine and transparent. He gave Ivan the unwavering security he had been denied for the past 3 years. Christian never hid their relationship, fiercely staked his claim when facing a rival, and when the unexpected pregnancy occurred, his immediate reaction was to take responsibility rather than make excuses. Their love is a fateful, perfect complement to each other. The ending doesn't rely on the cliché of a medical miracle. Christian still can't walk. Yet this imperfect reality only highlights the profound depth and authenticity of their relationship. When they decide to bind themselves together forever in the name of love, that soul-deep connection is truly heartwarming and profoundly healing.